I used to be able to see the lights of Hollywood Boulevard from my apartment window. Not metaphorically, this was real life. I lived 2 blocks away from Sid Grumman's famous Chinese theater, in a 1920s Art Deco building where it was easy to imagine past generations of hopeful actors and writers pecking away on their Underwoods or rehearsing audition sides late into the night. I was one of 25 filmmakers selected from thousands for a prestigious fellowship at a famous film conservatory. Improbably, this working-class kid from Pittsburgh had gotten his foot in Hollywood's door. And then I left. Unlike many Hollywood stories, my departure came without scandal or a very public breakdown. There wasn't even anything that could have made a melodramatic scene in a second-rate screenplay. I just left. Quietly, and drowning in shame and regret. On Friday, I was a shiny, hopeful prospect, certain that my films would be loved and adored. By Sunday, I was driving east on the I-10 with everything I owned stuffed into the back of a rental truck that had a shimmy and a hard pull to the left. And for the next 20 years, I told myself a story that I had blown my one shot, that creativity had a window and that mine had surely closed. If you're over 50 and telling yourself something similar, that you should have started earlier, that you once had talent, or that you too missed your moment, then I need you to hear this. You're not too late. You're right on time. For 2 decades, I carried the grief of films I never made. Not bad films or box office flops, but perfect films. Every frame flawless, and every word poignant and timeless. How do I know they were perfect? Because all unmade art is perfect. It won't disappoint you. It can't. Imagination rarely, if ever, produces a mediocre product. And that fantasy of perfection kept me frozen. I couldn't let go of the past, and I couldn't fully embrace the present. But eventually, I realized something important. It wasn't actually Hollywood and my perfect films that I was grieving. It was authorship and agency. It was permission. Permission to be the artist I once imagined myself to be, but wouldn't let happen because of my limiting beliefs and fear of destroying my fantasies that once inspired me, but were now imprisoning me. But now, after all of these years, I've learned something. Most people over 50 aren't stuck because they lack talent. They're stuck because they think the door has closed. But it hasn't. You, have been sold a false story, sometimes by culture, most of the time by ourselves. And that story says that art belongs to the young, that genius peaks early, and that reinvention is only for the lucky. Or is it? Look at painter Grandma Moses. She only began painting seriously in her 70s, but went on to create more than 1,500 canvases over the next 30 years. Or writer Toni Morrison, who didn't publish her first novel until she was nearly 40 and did some of her most powerful work in her 50s and beyond. Their stories show that the second act isn't a consolation prize. Often it's the deeper act, the stronger act. Because by 50, you're not creating to impress. You're creating because something in you refuses to die. That same spark refused to die in me too. But it needed a shift in perspective. And when that shift came, it didn't arrive with a big comeback. There was no heroic return to filmmaking and no public decoration that I was reclaiming my artistic life. It started with a promise. I promised my 3 kids, who were either out of the house or away at college, that I would write each of them a letter every week for a year. That was it. Just 3 envelopes a week. After a few weeks of my campaign, I got tired of sending plain white paper in plain white envelopes, so I started decorating them. At first, it was just some rubber stamps and ink, then drawings, then paintings, then hand-cut relief prints. Every week for 52 weeks. 156 letters later, I realized something. While I didn't have that Hollywood career I once dreamed of, I did have an art practice. And a practice was what I'd been missing all along. A dedication and commitment to something that I had lost 30 years ago. But now, a few years north of 50, I'd finally given myself permission to create again. This time with a few more advantages than back then. And if you're over 50 and wanting to rekindle your own art practice, here's an advantage you may not see yet. You've survived things your 25-year-old self couldn't imagine. You've lived decades of love, loss, work, and endurance. You have persevered time and time again. So no, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from depth of both character and experience. The problem isn't ability. Never has been. It's the myth that this season of life is for maintenance instead of expansion, for heading off quietly into your retirement years instead of growing into whom you've always wanted to be, an artist. But what if this moment, right here, right now, is the beginning of your most honest and creative decade yet, just waiting for you to let it unfold? If you want to return to the artist you once imagined yourself to be, let me offer this advice. Don't start with a rebrand. You don't need it. Don't announce your return to art. Nobody cares. And don't try to reclaim some former lost glory. It's only a youthful pipe dream. Start with one small defiant promise. Just one sketch a week, or one poem a month. Maybe one photograph a day, or just one quiet song every Sunday morning. Anything. Just keep it small enough that you can't fail, and private enough that it stays sacred. Because momentum doesn't come from motivation. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. Small promises done regularly. Here's what I know now that I didn't as the lights of LA dipped below the horizon in my rearview mirror. That ache that you feel about your own unmade work isn't evidence that it's over. It's evidence that something in you is still alive. You're not grieving a missed opportunity. You're feeling a pulse. The second act artist isn't someone who had a perfect first act, as if there is such a thing. No, they're someone who decides now that the story isn't finished, that there's so much more to be done. I may have left Hollywood, but I didn't lose my agency or my desire. I just had to reclaim it. And you can too. As long as you're breathing, you're not done. Before you go, make one small promise. Write it in the comments. Just one creative act you'll complete this week. Make it small but specific. And most importantly, make it keepable. Then come back here and tell me how you kept it. That's how your second act begins. making and keeping promises. If you want more conversations like this, like, share, and subscribe to join me here at The Second Act Artist. Because it's never too late to create.